The future of living with AI, a statement. So good morning to everyone, and welcome to my talk here. This event, yesterday and today, is taking place under the motto, the future of living with AI, and aims at a responsibility to look at the future with its digitalization in general and smart intelligent systems. I think that such a discussion is important, and I'm honored to be here today. I would like to start with Isaac Asimov, a former American writer and professor at Boston University, and his book Reason, published in 1941, which is about a two-man spaceship crew and Qt, a robot who from a certain point on perceives human commands as inferior and claims, loosely based on René Descartes, that he himself exists because he thinks. Qt also argues that he is superior to humans because, for example, he does not need sleep breaks, is less prone to errors, and can also perform executable tasks more reliably. So far, it is a story, a science fiction story. But when we read Reason, we learn a lot more. The two astronauts first try to dissuade Qt from these thoughts and to convince Qt of reality, that is, and more precisely, the perceived reality of the astronauts. But all the arguments do not help, and turning Qt off also fails. The situation comes to a head when a life-threatening situation arises that threatens to harm not only the spaceship, but the entire Earth. The two astronauts eventually realize that despite all the dangers and problems with Qt, all the machines still work perfectly, and that both the spaceship and the Earth still exist. So, they come to the realization that Qt, although he was not aware of it, had been strictly following one rule all along. People must not come to harm. The astronauts conclude that they are in good hands and need not to do anything for the rest of their service. So they are superfluous. So the question that arises is, will we, who live in the here and now and are not part of the science fiction story, also be superfluous at some point? Or in Qt's logic, will our world and our lives soon be more and more dominated by artificial intelligence? And will only the AI engineers be needed, that is, the gods who develop the systems, who maintain them, who continue to convince society of their necessity, so that we humans remain well looked after and life becomes even safer and we all feel comfortable the whole day? Note that humans do not come to harm is the first Asimov's law. And the fact that Qt does not obey human orders does not contradict the second Asimov's law, because in Qt's logic, an artificial intelligence is more intelligent than we humans. Hence, the disregard for human orders is due to the task of protecting humans from endangering themselves. But let us come back to our world today, and allow me at this point to use the term intelligent systems or intelligent assistants from now on, instead of the term artificial intelligence, because that is more accurate. What everyone in society and most of the industry world is talking about today as artificial intelligence is ultimately only something that is capable of performing a certain task. The winner of the Science Slam of the Wissensstadt Berlin 2021 is a friend and colleague of mine, Christoph Schommer, professor at the Dahlem Center for Machine Learning and Robotics at the Freie University Berlin. He gave a speech with the support of his two 9-year-old daughters about abstract and rational thinking, self-reflection, social interaction. In his talk, Christoph enumerated what distinguishes artificial intelligence from intelligent systems. The intelligent systems, he said, do only solve specific problems, such as a robot that explores the surface of the moon, or a car that indicates how far you can still drive when the current fuel in the tank. His daughters consequently said that in their understanding, artificial intelligence is something that can also tell jokes, recognize feelings, hold a conversation on its own, and not just solve mathematical problems. In other words, everything that a human being can do. For my colleague, this is a proof that even children develop a sense of what constitutes intelligence and what does not. So, in this sense, shouldn't the title of today's symposium rather be The Future of Living Together with IA, where IA stands for intelligent agents, or even better, intelligent assistants? Let's take a closer look with a few examples. Intelligent assistants in modern vehicles take care of us with precisely computed information, such as calculating our current position and navigating to our destination by including current traffic jam reports. In addition, the assistant keeps the vehicle in its lane by temporarily taking over the steering. It controls the starting of the car by checking whether the human being is fit to drive, keyword alcohol, and presents much more information regarding the vehicle's status with statistical numbers. Of course, this is all very useful. And after a certain point, however, you get used to it and do not want to do it without its usefulness. But at the latest, when the yellow light comes on, constantly prompting us to have the next inspection within the next X days, including a blinking, or when the assistant recognizes tiredness at the wheel and suggests that we finally should stop and take a break, don't we begin to ask ourselves who is actually serving whom here? And who sets these parameters? The AI engineer? Myself, unconsciously? Fortunately, there are no punishment yet, such as a small electric shocks if the recommended exit is not taken, or a higher insurance policy if the maintenance interval is not followed exactly. Or let's take the field of art. Writing poems, painting pictures, or composing music, especially through techniques based on deep learning, are stimulating more and more artists to use them for their creativity. I think that is a good thing overall, and I hope that such creative developments remain transparent. Eventually, we should think not only of made in Europe or made in China, but also made by human or made by Bob, the intelligent assistant. Examples. In 2015, Alex Mortvinsev and the Google Brain AI research team published some fascinating results. After training to identify objects based on visual cues and inputting photos of skiers and randomly shaped objects, their program began to produce digital images reminiscent of the combined imaginations of Walt Disney and Peter Bruegel the Elder. Among them were a hybrid pig snail, or a camel bird, and a dogfish. This was a new art form called inceptionism, named after the inception algorithm in which a neural network gradually zooms in on an image and tries to see it in the context of what is already known. The inception algorithm is based on a convolutional neural network to assist in image analysis and object recognition. It was developed as a module for GoogleNet, and it is currently known as Deep Dreams. Taryn Southern is a pop artist, has worked with several AI platforms to co-produce her debut album I Am AI in 2017. Her single Break Free is a human-AI collaboration, as she explains. She says, using AI, I'm writing my lyrics and vocal melodies to the music and using that as a source of inspiration. Because I'm able to iterate with the music, and because it gives feedback and parameters, and because I can edit as many times as I need, it still feels like it is mine. Xander Steenbrugge is an engineer from Ghent, Belgium. He has developed an AI system that creates visualizations in time with music, achieving mesmerizing results. The piece is part of the project called Neural Synesthesia, which is designed to use music to create visualizations in a number of different ways. Steenbrugge makes it clear that he does not create these works, but that he brings them to life together with his AI models. Last example, Obvious, which is a collective of researchers and artists who work with deep neural networks to explore the creative potential of AI in arts. In 2017-18, Obvious fed 15,000 classical portraits into a generative adversarial network, GANs, and let this deep learning technique autonomously create a series of new portraits. From these, they selected some by themselves and thus founded artificially the so-called Bellamy family. The presented family tree is therefore completely fictitious. The painting of Edmond Bellamy was finally auctioned and sold at Christie's for more than 400,000 US dollars, almost twice as much as other auctioned paintings by Roy Lichtenstein and Andy Warhol together. However, not everyone who knew its artificial character considered the painting Edmond Bellamy as to be art. For Pierre Fautrel, the co-founder of Obvious, however, there is no doubt, as he explains. Even though the generative adversarial networks have created the painting artificially, it is up to us, humans, to decide, to compute, and to print it on canvas. Most recently, however, the head of a large German telecoms company proudly informed us via a major German newspaper and various social networks that Ludwig van Beethoven's 10th Symphony could finally be composed with the help of a deep learning solution. That's interesting. But what bothers me a lot here is the implicit general assertion, the 10th Symphony, and not a version of the 10th Symphony. I mean, many of my scientific colleagues and myself, we could do the same. We take Beethoven's compositions as underlying data, train our system, and then apply it to our version of the 10th Symphony, with our parameters, with our data, with our algorithmic concepts, and with our creativity. And then we have already several 10th symphonies, and we could organize a concert, 10 times Beethoven's 10th. Last example, our home, highly secured by cameras. Digitalization here and there with connections to emergency services and the police, switching the reading lamp on and off even when we ourselves are in the Bahamas. A few years ago, I attended a lecture in which the speaker reported on an intelligent carpet. This carpet was full of sensors, and it was able to recognize a patient's falling over as an emergency situation and call the emergency services and the police. This is madness. One goal called by Eric Topol, director of Scripps Research and one of the leading minds in AI and medicine, is to treat patients at home. Imagine someone falls over. The carpet calls the emergency, and Bob, the robot, does the emergency care on the spot. A former colleague of the University of Luxembourg told me that at a project meeting with partners from industry, the fully automated shutters equipped with sensors on the windows suddenly enveloped the room in complete darkness, and all the participants could no longer even find their way to the light switch. At the moment I'm writing these lines, I'm sitting in one of the university's WebEx rooms, and every time I move, the giant screen starts honking softly, accompanied by the texts, "Hello," and "Tap the home button to start an activity from the WebEx app." It is completely annoying. Ladies and gentlemen, with all this usefulness and the associated goals and visions, one might get the idea that it is more about functioning, digitized systems that we humans have to fit into. I can assure you that the shutters will always darken the room as soon as the sensors report too much brightness. You don't stand a chance in the office. Maybe it should not be I think, therefore I am, but I surrender to technology, therefore I am. Anyone who does not own a smartphone or is not able to use apps or QR codes today is simply lagging behind in many parts of life. A life without is virtually no longer conceivable. And if modern technology is progress, then perhaps it is a double-edged progress, or at least progress for the younger generation that is growing up with it. It also seems to me that many people are not really aware of the implications of using intelligent assistants. It is consumed. And if something does not work out or we do not like it anymore, then we just buy something else. Or even more, something else is just suggested by such an intelligent assistant. Example. First, my favorite actress as the heroine in a disaster film. Then, at the suggestion of the streaming service and on the basis of my created profile, a love story with the same leading actress. That is all I have to do. It goes by itself. Well, at some point the TV switches off too. I am already asleep by then. For the system, however, that means inactivity. At a conference of the German Ethics Council in Berlin 2 or 3 years ago, a colleague from Augsburg spoke about a study on the subject of care for elderly, involving healthcare robots and inmates of an old people's home. She mentioned that after the end of the trial period, the participants were asked how they felt about this time. There was at least one woman who said that she liked the project with the robot very much, but not because of its functionality and care, but because every 2 days the young female students came to maintain the system. So what does the future look like? In a survey I conducted about 1 year ago with some of my students as well as with some of my colleagues, a total of 116 responded as follows to the question of whether AI, in the sense of intelligent systems, was for or against humanity. 14 were totally pro, 21 were almost pro, 63 saw AI as a double-edged sword, 13 were slightly against, and 3 were totally against. And yes, and 2 people did not care at all. Even though it was not a representative survey, there is now a healthy balance in terms of a difference of opinion. That is good for now. It is difficult to give prognosis. A usefulness is certainly good, but too much usefulness or too little of it is not, in my opinion. Too much means one relies on it too much and no longer knows alternatives. If you do not have an internet connection and a navigation with your mobile phone does not work, you will possibly get lost. Conversely, you may also get lost, but you might meet new people by asking, for example, for the direction and be able to cross the road safely. No matter what happens. But what is important for me is the transparency of these assistants and from the point of view of the end user. The insight to educate oneself further or to always try to understand the things behind. The worst thing is to remain in the dark. Of course, incredibly powerful technology is an advance that we, not only as Europeans, should not miss. After all, we want a world that is more sustainable, safer, and more ethical. But new technologies like intelligent assistants should be there for people, not the other way around. New technologies should be transparent and, as things change, adaptable. Humans' level of education should be central, and we, the humans, should have the choice to use new technologies or an alternative. Technology should be tested in the long term and not developed exclusively by engineers. One day, maybe we also need something like the Hippocratic Oath. As for QT and its autonomy of such an AI, personally, I think that will eventually come true. Already today, we can no longer say with certainty whether the voice on the phone is not a machine after all. To pass the Turing test is within reach. I'm not afraid of that, even if the scenario with killer robots keep coming to mind. I'm much more afraid of people who disregard the basic ethical and moral principles of our existence for the sake of power and economic advantage. I look forward to your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.